Good evening. Yeah, that was an interesting day today. Let me get started. First of all, good evening. And today there were two things which kind of was interesting, and I figured I'm going to share this with you guys. And for one is the one thing I wanted to, since I said yesterday with the lighting here and why I'm doing this here in this room is I have closed captioning enabled for those viewers for whom the English language is a second language or third language, and they can read this then with what I'm saying. And this room here is the guest bedroom, and this is the smallest room in the house, and the acoustic is good. So I don't have any reverberation here, which means the automated YouTube transcription for closed captioning is more accurate than if I do it in any other room I have available. That may not be, and I added a second light bulb here into the little light fixture. And so that's why that's why I decided to do this here, besides the other reason, but that was the primary reason, is I found out from my other YouTube videos I did, is more reverberation there is worse the transcription of for captioning gets. So that's why we're here where we are. But I hope that's okay with you. So what happened today is Gerhard Schröder, the former chancellor, gave an interview, sort of, to the New York Times a couple days ago. I think it was either Friday or Saturday. And I read this today. I'm not a New York Times fan. I used to live in New York City for quite a few years. In my office, I had my office on 42nd Street between 6th and Broadway, right off Times Square. And that was the main entrance, was on 42nd Street, and we had a rear entrance on the other side of the building on 41st Street. And when you stepped out of 41st Street and you looked to the west side, to the Hudson River, you could see the New York Times headquarters there. So I was just a block and a half away from them. And I had two stockbrokers on my floor in the office next to us, and I got to talk about it, to see what they were reading and, that sort of stuff. And they said to me the only time they would recommend the New York Times was down at the Fulton Fish Market to wrap up fish. That was a standard procedure when you bought fresh fish at a fish market. They would use to wrap them up in newspaper. That was their opinion about the New York Times. For the viewers outside the United States who are not fully familiar with our newspapers here in the United States, the New York Times is a slightly more to the left-leaning newspaper, what we would call progressives. And they probably cover that range of the more conservative Democrats and the social conservatives. So a smaller portion of, of the more moderate Republicans. That is kind of their daily reader base they have. And so I wasn't surprised, because, Schröder kind of fits into this, and he gave an interview, and that kind of had me thinking. One of the things, you can read it, I will post a link to that article in the New York Times in the, not comment, but in the description section. So you can click on it, and if it is available in your country, you will be able to see it and read it. It is in English. I had to subscribe to it. Something I don't like, I used my Google account because I really didn't want the New York Times to know that I'm not a daily reader of the New York Times. I read mostly newspapers, just as a information. And I read the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and then whatever else comes up. I don't watch television. I don't watch CNN, and I don't watch Fox News or any of those channels. And I read the European newspapers. Like I said, it's in Russia it is TASS. In Germany it's primarily Welt, die Süddeutsche Zeitung, FAZ, Zeit, Spiegel, Stern, the Le Figaro, and then the London Times at times when when I need to, or other English-speaking newspapers in countries if there are certain events happening. I also read the Global Times, that is the Chinese official English-speaking daily news source at times. Otherwise, I'm subscribed to Bloomberg and to CNBC, primarily for financial, markets and that sort of stuff. That is what I'm actually following. So this is kind of my background. So the New York Times is not a newspaper which fits into my interests I have, because they're, they serve other subjects or themes more than what I, would usually would watch or I'm interested in on a daily basis. I don't own a television anymore, and that I want to throw this in 2020, the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I started to tune in, and the moderator asked the question about the green politics, environmental issues in oil and that sort of stuff, and gas. And Joe Biden started out saying that sometimes in the 1950s, I think he was in Delaware at the time, his mother would drive him every morning to school, and he said it was raining oil. They had oil on the windshield on a car. I've never heard of any oil raining anywhere down in the world in its entire history. And it was at that point when I turned off the television, and I said, this has gone too far out for the normal person to be no, it was just I had it at this point. So I got rid of the television altogether. So I get my news online primarily through these sources. The Financial Times too, out of England. That is another newspaper I read pretty much on a regular basis. Now, back to the Schröder interview there, which he gave in Hanover, Germany, at his home or house to the reporters of the New York Times. He said that because of his strategy or, involvement in this right after he lost the election to Merkel, that was in 2005, with going to Gazprom and buddying up with Putin there, and starting this whole thing. Germany has accumulated great wealth, and the Germans got richer. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying there was something to that tune. I'm not quoting this now exactly, but that was essentially what he said. So that the great Chancellor Gerhard Schröder has made the Germans wealthy. Well, Mr. Schröder, if this applies to all Germans, I haven't got my check yet. Just that, I can supply the mailing address to you or my bank account information, and you can transfer the money if you want to do that via SWIFT, since I'm not blocked. Anyway, and you're looking at this. This is how far to see these people are. You're looking at this and you say, well, in Germany, they're paying $7 to $8 in that range per gallon for gasoline, almost twice as much as what we're paying here in Kansas City. It is about the same what they're paying in Los Angeles, but Los Angeles and California is a completely different story. They voted for this, and that's what they got. Now, to refine oil into gasoline and diesel costs pretty much the same here as what it costs the German refineries to refine oil over in their refineries they have, and they got 5 or 6 of them. And that will be, we're getting into that here in a minute. So I don't know where he thinks that Germany got rich when they're paying twice as much in gasoline of what we're paying. And I do not know the fuel or the gas consumption in the industry, if they would have paid really that much more, if they would have gotten American gas versus Russian gas, if that would have made a big difference, and I don't think so, because all of the stuff is traded. through the exchanges. You have the mercantile exchanges, and you have ICE in New York. ICE is the primary trading platform for these materials, for crude oil and for natural gas and for gasoline, ROBB, and that is what drives the market, and the Europeans have a exchange for them as well. So all of this is traded by demand and supply, and you're buying futures basically based on a X amount of crude oil. Usually it's 100,000 barrel contracts at a time what you have to purchase with a delivery. And here in the United States, when you do this, any person can buy those futures. They will come due in 3 months, 6 months, depends on which one you're buying. And they have a set delivery date, which means you have to be ready when you hold the contract, when the contract closes, when the future closes, the future contract closes. You have to be able to take delivery of that oil physically. And you have to have a storage facility basically for it. That means it's being available at a certain pump station. They will put that in the contract. It usually says that in there. And then you can decide that to get it on a barge or on trucks and have it trucked. And it's a lot of oil, 100,000 barrels, I can tell you that much. But this is basically where we are with this stuff. So he made this statement that Germany now has gotten rid of because of his grandeur scheme and how he managed everything and this, that, and the other thing. And you're looking at this, and this is hard to digest. This is something I understand when people say, they grew up in poor families, or they have we say humble background and that sort of stuff. We have an old saying, and it is, you're not responsible, it's not your fault when you have a poor father, but it is your fault when you have a poor father-in-law. Just keep that in mind. So it's sometimes our choices we make then later on in life, if you can. But love should prevail rather than the bank account, but that is how it used to be. Anyway, so this really stunned me of what he said there. One thing I wanted to correct in this is the New York Times said this with the North Stream 1 and North Stream 2 pipelines. I had said that the East Germans had already a pipeline to the Soviet Union. And this is not quite correct, but North Stream 1, the initial development of this, or the idea to circumvent all of the other Comecon countries, was to build this, was initiated in the 80s by East Germany. And there is a reason for this. And a little bit before I made this video tonight, I did some research to be sure to explain this correctly. Now, until 1960s or late 50s, the Soviet Union supplied oil, coal, iron ore, and gas by railroad. And in one of my other videos, I explained that the Russian railroad network has a different track width than the European one. So when you go from Belarus to Poland, from the Ukraine to Poland, from Ukraine to the Czech Republic, back then it was the Czech Republic, so it's Slovakia primarily, to the Slovak Republic today, or into Romania, they had to change the wheels out, the set of wheels. They can lift the car up, and then they take them out and they put them on the smaller track and vice versa. It's very time consuming. So sometimes in the 1950s, the Soviet Union started to build a pipeline network with 28-inch pipe diameters. And that went from the Soviet Union past the Ural Mountains, from the Siberian oil fields and gas fields, through Belarus into Poland, and through the Ukraine into the Slovak Republic. And then I think there were some drop-offs in it to Romania, some of it, and then over to the Czech Republic to get that distributed. So East Germany was connected at first for the oil pipelines. That was the more critical one for crude oil, via the Polish pipeline, and that was called the Friendship Pipelines. That was the Comecon thing, the first thing. And the United States got really, really tense about this now, having the Russians deliver oil and gas to the Comecon countries. And this was right about when this whole thing, John F. Kennedy was president at the time. And this was when the Cuban Missile Crisis developed. So this came on top of it. And in October, in the end of October 1964, the New York Times wrote an article, and this is the irony in it, pointing out that the Soviet Union had completed both pipeline systems all the way to the end destinations, including the stretch they had where they still had to use railroad tanks or tank trucks, for a while. And that was now all completed. And it took 1.5 million barrels of oil to fill the entire pipeline up before they can actually start moving anything in there. And at the time, 1.5 million barrels was a lot of oil. But anyway, that oil went first to the refinery. It wound up at the refinery Schwed, Schewdt, which is in southeast corner of Berlin. And that was the first refinery East Germany had built. That was done 1962, 1964. That's where they were ducked into the Russian oil, or into the Soviet Russian oil, really, at that point. So this is how long we go back. This is almost 60 years ago now. And then the gas pipelines came at a later stage. So first oil into Slovakia, Poland, everyone got some oil. The problem the East Germans now had was that at certain times the Polish neighbors would turn the oil spigot, a little bit more open, and then they drained a little bit more oil out into Poland, and then the pipeline to Germany, East Germany, got a little bit less oil. And this was a constant contention in the Comecon system. And at a later point, then the gas pipelines were done. Now, this is where West Germany came in with then Chancellor Willy Brandt. He went to the Soviet Union. He said, look, if you bring us natural gas, we, West Germany, will supply the pipes for it. And Russia went for it. And that was in the height of the Vietnam War. So the United States back then already looked at this with great skepticism, that West Germany now was trying to get into this gas deal with the Russians or the Soviet Union. So long story short, they ended up building that gas pipeline that went through from Russia coming into the Ukraine, from the Ukraine into the Slovak Republic, then into the Czech Republic, and then to Bavaria. So the Czech, Slovaks, Ukrainians, and the Germans, or the southern Germans, were then supplied with Russian gas for the first time. Then the East Germans started to build a second refinery in, Leuna, in Thuringia, that is in middle Germany, and that went then through Poland and back through the Belarus into the other pipeline. So they had now 2 refineries operational with Russian oil, and that supplied basically all of the gasoline for East Germany. Now, the East German car manufacturers, they built very small cars with 2-cycle engines, 20 horsepower or so, for their Trabants and for their Wartburgs primarily. This was these things, they sounded real funny. There was and they smelled, of course, because it was a mix. I think it was 1:40 or something like this. So you had 1 liter oil and 40 liter gasoline, something to that tune. And the exhaust was just obnoxiating over there. And so they didn't use a lot of gasoline. And now what East Germany did is they needed valuta, that is the hard currency, because none of the currencies in the Comecon were traded at the currency markets in the Western world. There was no real currency exchange happening at the time. So what they were trying to do is East Germany was always trying to get Westmark, in order to purchase things on the open market or US dollars when they traveled or they bought things. Bananas, for instance, they needed bananas, so they had to purchase bananas in US dollars for the population. And so they needed to have hard currency, valuta. And what they winded up doing is, out of Leuna, is they fumbled 30% of the gasoline production, was then shipped with a new pipeline over into the next state over, it is either Bavaria or Hessen, to a tank system over the distribution point. And that was sold in Westmark. And the Russians got a hold of that idea, and then the Russians started to reduce the oil deliveries to Leuna, to the refinery in Leuna. And then they had fuel shortages. This transpired. This was very prevalent in 82 to 85. So because the Russians didn't want their oil to go over to West Germany as gasoline, because they got subsidized oil prices. They weren't buying the oil on the open market like we did, where you went to exchanges and future contracts. They were getting a discounted price as a brotherly, socialist kind of a deal thing in the Comecon, and so that was all discounted. Now, the Russian oil and the Russian gas today is paid at market value. This is not like that Schröder went over there and Putin was so delighted to help all of these poor Germans out, and he gave them gas and oil, like if it was free or close to free, like the Russians would, do something here unbelievable, and Schröder was like walking on water or some shit like this. None of this transpired. This reality is they're paying and have been paying market value for this stuff. So this is how much nonsense this is what we're listening to, from what these people think of what this is and what it is not. But this is the reality of it. So anyway, by the time the wall finally collapsed in 1989 and the reunification happened, now the reunified Germany suddenly had two additional refineries they didn't have before, supplied with Russian oil. So the unified Germany now basically inherited this system, what we have today since 1990, basically. Before we paid for it, we got, say, like a total out of the Leuna production alone, 30%, but nothing from Berlin. So we may have gotten 10%, 5%, 10% of the two refineries or the complete gasoline production out of East Germany prior to this. Now 100% was available. And so this opened up the whole story now, with Gazprom coming in, Rosneft coming in, and everything else. In the process of the reunification, the two refineries, which were state-owned by the federal or by the East German government, were privatized, and Total, the gasoline or oil company Total, bought them, but they also got Rosneft involved in it as additional partner, because the Russian side now was supplying the oil to these refineries, and they had been. So when Rosneft was halfway privatized, they merged the company. They're operating today. So you have the Russian state-owned Rosneft. Total got out. Rosneft bought them just 2 months ago, and they're basically, Rosneft is now in charge more or less of both of these refineries in East Germany, which is now unified Germany, producing gasoline, which is sold at about $7 plus per gallon in Germany. And now you have this kook, Schröder, running around, and he says he is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, it can't get any more delusional than this. I think the psychiatrists have a word, they have they have a manual, the psychiatric manual thing there, what they have, you know, and if you probably were a psychiatrist, you probably could diagnose this, what that man is suffering from. But this is delusion de grandeur, you know, literally. And so this is what you got there. And this is why I said before, but that's why you have no way that there's going to be any ABC weapons involved in this, because this thing is so interwoven and no one can get out of it because they got themselves in this utter codependency with this. And the gas is basically the same thing. Now, the gas pipeline, which came in the 1970s and started to function somewhere by 1974 into Bavaria, provided in the 1970s and 80s about 1/3 of all the natural gas needed by Germany. That meant 2/3 of gas came from somewhere else. Now they're like it's 50 to 70% of Russian gas, with the already existing gas lines which had run into East Germany because they got them in the reunification as well. So this is now all one big mix which was already there. Now with the, like I said, is the that's why no one really objected to this with the other pipeline, the Nord Stream 1, which is in operation to circumvent all the former Comecon countries out of it to prevent any type of disruption, because that had been planned or, you know, started already in the 80s by East Germany. So this was not some new project which suddenly came out of the blue. And when Schröder got elected in 1998 and took over as chancellor, that this suddenly, you know, originated out of his office, and it all turned into gold and roses and everything else at the same time. That is not exactly on how that happened. And East Germany had talked to Finland about it, because it goes through parts of the waters there off the Finnish coast, and so they had to get them involved in this, and then, like I said, that's the Soviet Union. So it was between these three countries which had originally planned this whole thing with Nord Stream 1. That is, you got that now. That was finished. And Nord Stream 2, that was then the deal which would have been made with Schröder being at Gazprom, you know, in his interaction and lobbying and everything else, with Steinmeier and all of his other guys he got over there in that happy bunch of the Social Democrats. But this, I hope, gives you a better understanding on how complex this whole system is. And at this point, this whole sanction thing is really only affecting the banking system, where certain transfers cannot operate anymore, but most of the oligarchs you have and Russian companies abroad are still operating one way, form, shape, or another. Okay, so I don't know if they need to transfer money into Russia or not, but that kind of flow is disrupted. But the Russian oligarchs still can operate their businesses, say like here in the United States or in Europe. That I can tell you. So they're not going to lose anything out. So that was the first part. And now the kind of more funny thing tonight or today, what happened was, I'm following on my Twitter account a US soldier who had gone over fairly early on to the Ukraine and is fighting there in the international division they have, or one of them. And they had received vehicles finally, and it was mostly 4x4s, you know, trucks, 4x4s, SUVs, that kind of stuff. And there were two newer Volkswagen transporters in it. And on one transporter, they have the national flag on it. They're all painted olive green now, the standard NATO olive green color. They had, besides the Ukrainian flag, they had someone had written on there in white paint on one of the Volkswagens. They said, "ORCS, ORCS must die." I'm looking at this, I say, well, I've seen a lot of stuff on military vehicle and markings and this, that, and the other thing. You know, you need a booklet to follow this through when you're not dealing with this on a daily basis of what these markings mean, you know, what company they belong to and that kind of stuff, and transport things and signs and that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I put a tweet under that picture, under that what he had posted. I said, if someone could tell me what is or what are orcs, well, I don't know. And then it started. I must have gotten 50 to 100 responses to that one comment I left as sub-comments on there. And so I know now the orcs are a group of despicable people in that movie Lord of the Rings. I've never watched the Lord of the Rings. I did not know that there was movie or movies by the name of Lord of the Rings. I'm obviously too old, and I think like I must be feeling like 100 today. And all the young people, they came in and they said, oh my God, this is this and that and the other thing. And then of course it started. Then the derogatory stuff then really started, Well, the pro-Russian people then commented that they said that's racism, and then the other ones, they said, fuck this, and it went to all that language stuff. And I found that interesting. So I know now what orcs are, and I Googled it, and the other gal, she put that up there, and the other guy put a picture up of a Russian soldier with a pig face and 2 bottles of vodka sticking out of his sides, a shopping bag in one hand, rifle in the other hand, and he looked pretty poor. I mean, this is the kind of stuff. So now I know. But this is our younger generation is really has gotten influenced by 2 things, and I don't know if that's good or bad. That is, for one, the movie industry with these kind of fictional movies where you classify people into, particular groups and that stuff. I don't think that's good. And then the video games, especially the war games. This is to the younger audience. I'm not that old. I'm 55. And I don't know how I'm supposed to be feeling at 55, but let me just give you a little word of wisdom here. War on a computer where you sit in a high-end luxury chair with all comforts, perfect temperature, and you're sitting on a computer, high-dollar computer, gaming computer, and you shoot people, you kill people online with your friends, you go forwards and backwards of who kills more people and which tanks to pick and that sort of stuff, is very, very far removed from the realities of a battlefield. And if you are not really into killing people or serving in a military, serving in a Western military in a democracy means that you are defending your country and the values and the system of the Western world. And with that comes a great responsibility. And the ultimate sacrifice in this is death. Every soldier in any of the NATO member countries who serves, his life or her life is up for grabs on the battlefield. These people will give everything, and there's no return. There's the chance that they can get injured, badly injured, that they may be crippled for the rest of their lives and need attention and care from other people. These things have absolutely nothing to do with what you see and how you experience video gaming and wars on a computer. This is very different realities. These realities are so far apart that these are, you can say, they're 2 different galaxies. And most people I've known who have ever been in combat, even the hardest ones, they shit in their pants when the grenades come in and the shelling starts and you have your comrades die next to you in the foxhole or getting ripped into bits and pieces. If you have never seen a body which has been torn apart by an explosion, then you consider yourself very, very lucky. And you may want to think about this, of what these people have to do out there in the battlefield, in the combat, and what you're doing on your computer, that these things have nothing in common. I just want to mention this to bring some reality back into this. I have seen the pictures of soldiers, casualties on both sides, wounded in casualties. And let me tell you, this is not a pretty picture at all. I have been in and around military and in dangerous situations myself, and I can appreciate this. And these people who go out there and fight a war are heroes. The Russian soldiers, no matter what you want to call them, are heroes in Russia because they're fighting for their side. We may not like their attitude, we may not like their ideas, but they're soldiers as well. So there is a commonality in there, and only a soldier will understand another soldier. If you have to experience this, what you have to experience, what the civilian population has to experience in the Ukraine is as bad as what a soldier has to experience in battle, because they're seeing the direct consequences out of this stuff. And this is going to take a long term to heal from that mental stress and the anxiety which comes with it. Video gaming might be great, to get time killed, basically. But it has nothing to do with the realities of war or military operations. And with that, you have a great night.